Welcome to Class 4 of the Foundation of Creation series. And this class is called Dust of the Earth. This is about probiotics and living organisms. So I will open with a prayer. So Father, we just thank you for this time together, and I just ask that truth would be spoken tonight, that revelation would break forth, that we'd come to understand you and your design better, how you designed us to function and how you designed the earth. And just help us to understand this world of living organisms and how we can cooperate with your design to work with you in our bodies and in our health. And we just thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your love. And just may we come to know you better. In Jesus' name, amen. So Roman numeral 1, a world of living organisms. So just very basic, very simple. We live in a world of trillions and trillions of living organisms. And it's a natural part of our world. It's a part of our life. Bacteria, viruses, fungus, parasites, it's in everything. It's in the air you're breathing, it's in the soil, it's on plants, it's on animals, and it's on people. You absolutely, as hard as you might try, you will never ever be able to avoid living organisms in our earth. It's part of God's natural created order. It's a vital part of the life cycle, and it's how the world is continually built up and broken down. And Ecclesiastes 3, a very famous verse, to everything there's a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to break down and a time to build up. So this is a perfect example of that. Talked about the carbon cycle in the last classes, how things are continually being composted and recycled back into the earth for life to start again. What's interesting, if you look at living organisms, and now that we have microscopes and we can discover these cool things, there are more living organisms in 1 square inch of your skin, in 1 inch, than people on the earth. If you take a teaspoon of soil out of the earth, 1 teaspoon of soil, there's over 20,000 different species, different types of living organisms, and at least 4 billion organisms in 1 teaspoon of soil. It's kind of hard to wrap your brain around that. That's obviously going to depend on the soil and the quality and where it comes from, but the point is there's tens of thousands of species of organisms and billions of organisms in every square inch of everything on this planet. The last class we talked about minerals, the focus of Foundation of Creation. A big part of that is Genesis 2:7, that the Lord God formed man out of dust of the earth. So if we truly believe that we're a dust of the earth, we have to look at the components of soil and understand that that's what we're made of. So minerals was a huge portion of that last class. Living organisms, equally important. The fact that the soil contains living organisms, that promotes life for all plant life on the earth. But the living organisms in our body promote life in us. It's important to understand that things are supposed to spoil. Things are supposed to go bad. Milk should go bad. Bread should go bad. If something is purchased by you and it doesn't go bad, you should be very concerned. You've all heard the stories of the McDonald's French fry that was found under the seat of the car, and it was a year old and it looked exactly the same. Okay, that is abnormal. That should have been consumed by living organisms. Why it wasn't is frightening. So throughout history, people ate fresh food. They grew fruit out of their garden. Even today, I lived in Europe for a while. Every night you'd stop home on your way home from work and you'd buy fresh bread and you'd eat it that night, because if you didn't, it would get hard and it would start to break down. That's normal. So again, this industry that we've created of changing our food, stripping the nutrients out of it so that it can sit on a shelf for an abnormal period of time, makes something living that God made into something dead. And that's not going to be beneficial to the body. Extreme examples would be things like, Twinkies and potato chips and things that just, they say Twinkies might be a good famine food. Okay, so I guess if you had nothing to eat, you'd been, 2 months without food, you might dive into that Twinkie. but normally things should break down and decompose because that's the natural life cycle. I want to make another point that it is important that our world is clean. That's very biblical, to wash hands, to stay clean, to keep things clean. But there's a big difference between cleanliness and sterility. We should not be sterile. We should not try to sterilize our world. We should not be sterilizing our bodies, and we're going to talk about that more lately, but that's what we're doing. We've learned that there are germs that can cause problems and infectious issues, and so we're trying to sterilize everything. Now that we've learned that the world is full of living organisms, we need to be clean and healthy, but we don't need to sterilize. And one of the reasons we don't have infectious disease today near at the rates we used to is because we cleaned up our world. We cleaned up plumbing, we cleaned up our water supply, and we have different ways of having cleanliness and sanitation. But again, that's very different than sterilization, which we will talk more about. The human body is composed of trillions and trillions of these living organisms. They actually outnumber cells in the body 10 to 1. Estimates change all the time. The most current I've heard is there's approximately 100 trillion cells in the human body. Well, that's not even true, because if there's 100 trillion something of the human body, 90 trillion of them are living organisms in our body. 10% of them are actual cells. So we're mainly composed of living bacteria and living organisms, 10 times more than cells of the human body. Very important to understand that. It is the most important component of our digestion, and it is our immune system. These living bacteria is what makes our immune system. And we're going to talk in detail about the immune system. The way the human body digests and breaks down food and the way our immune system works is a direct reflection of how living organisms live and work in soil and how they work with plants. It's a direct reflection of how we're made, again, because we're dust of the earth. It's how God designed us. These living bacteria, see, are in the trillions. They're in your mouth, your esophagus, every part of your intestinal tract. They're on your skin, your private areas, and they protect us from pathogenic organisms, from getting bacteria, fungus, viruses, parasites in and on our bodies. The skin is actually acidic. It's called an acid mantle, an acid covering on the body. The pH ranges from 4.5 to about 6.0. It's acidic. If the skin becomes alkaline, it invites pathogenic, you've heard of flesh-eating bacteria. These types of bacteria can only thrive on skin that's overly alkaline. And we always talk about alkalinity, how important it is to be alkaline. Well, the blood needs to be alkaline 7.4, but the skin is acidic. And the skin is acid to protect it from infectious and pathogenic organisms. I'm going to give you a good example. My cousin said it was okay to use this example. My cousin has a son, and he plays baseball, and he didn't have his mask, and so he borrowed somebody else's catcher's mask. And he had this little thing that started on his chin, and it turned out to be some type of a bacteria or fungus that he picked up on borrowing somebody's catcher's mask. And this thing started on his chin, and it started to grow, and it got on his cheek, and she started to get worried, of course. She tried natural things. She tried tea tree oil. He was washing his face. Finally went to the doctor, got an antibiotic. It got worse. She's really worried by this point. And she didn't know this about the skin is supposed to be acid. Well, what ended up happening is she was trying all these different things. He was scrubbing his face with soap. Well, if you know what most soaps contain, they contain lye, which is very alkaline, which is very bad for the skin. It kills the healthy organisms on your skin, it dries out your skin, and it causes lots of skin problems. So finally, she said, nothing's working, stop everything, and it went away on its own. Now, the reason it was multiplying and growing is because he was washing his face with soap, which was promoting the growth of the infectious bacteria on the skin, because the skin should be acidic. So if she would have put something acidic on his skin, it would have immediately killed and eradicated the infection, something like apple cider vinegar or lemon. So I have a little note here that if you wash your face, a good thing to do is Put a tablespoon, a little bit of apple cider vinegar in a glass of water, or a little lemon juice in a glass of water. Dip that in your cloth and wash your face with some acidic medium. It's much healthier for your skin. D, soil is not soil without living organisms. There's no life without living organisms on the plant. Think about it. How would things get recycled? How would things get broken down? How would things return to the earth? Impossible without living organisms. You can't have compost. You can't have new soil that's being regenerated without living organisms. We're seeing the damage that factory farming is doing. Not taking care of the soil, not putting the living organisms in the compost back into the soil, stripping the soil. We see this dead, dry, arid soil. Now we're forced to use chemicals and we're forced to use irrigation just to keep the plants alive. It's because we've stripped and destroyed the living organisms and the minerals out of the soil. The two things we're talking about, these two classes that are so critical for soil and plants, again, it's the same for our bodies. The body is going to understand living things that contain these organisms. So think about an apple falling off a tree. Couple of days, a deer can eat it. If not, the organisms are going to get hold of it, and it's going to start to break it down. That's the natural process. Same things in our body. If we eat an apple, the body understands it. The living bacteria can break it down and digest it. Everybody's happy. You put Coca-Cola and Twinkies and Twizzlers in your body's very confused. It's very challenging for the body to break that down. It just does everything it can to eliminate the poison as soon as humanly possible. But it really stresses digestion because the living organisms can't break it down. It's the same reason you don't put styrofoam or metal or plastic in your compost. Why? Because it doesn't break down. So we have to put living, real foods that God designed in our bodies for it to be broken down properly. Roman numeral 2, the role of living organisms in soil. So living organisms, just like us, need nutrients to survive. They're fed by minerals, oxygen, water, and other decomposed plant materials. So we're talking about these living organisms, how important they are, but they need nutrients to survive just like every other living thing. They need oxygen and minerals and water. Decomposed plant matter contain fulvic and humic minerals. I'm not going to go into the definition of what those are. I didn't talk about them last time in the minerals class because we talked 2 hours about minerals and we barely even touched it. So I'm throwing it in here because fulvic and humic minerals are the result of decomposed, broken down plant matter, and they feed living organisms. This is why you compost, to feed the living organisms in the soil so that you have healthy plants. If you look at the analysis of these minerals, they contain carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. If you remember when we looked at the composition, the breakdown of the human body, what are the basic elements of the human body? Carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. It's 97% of the human body. That's exactly what these plant minerals are made from. And that's why they're so crucial to the human body. That's why it's important to eat plant-based foods, to eat fresh foods straight out of the garden. I'm going to give you some information on how the minerals, decomposed plant matter, when it's broken down, these minerals, when they feed living organisms, living bacteria, the different benefits that that provides to whatever organism it's feeding, so plants or people. So this article that I read, and we have it on our website, Dr. Robert E. Pettit, Texas A&M University, it's this amazing article my dad found. He is like the expert on soil. And he wrote this huge article on the purpose and function of these minerals and how they interact with soil organisms to promote life in plants. So I'm reading this article that's exclusively about soil, and my mind's getting blown because I'm getting the revelation that this is the human body. This is how the body works. Everything that he's talking about that soil does for plants, these minerals do for the human body. So look at what they do. They promote fertility. We've heard of fertile soil. Hydration. So these minerals in your body have the capacity to hold 7 times their weight in water. So think about how you have a garden. You compost your garden. Why? So that it holds and retains water and moisture. Minerals do that for you. Minerals do that for us. Why are we so dehydrated? One reason is mineral deficiencies. You get good minerals in your body, you can drink less water because you're better hydrated. Chelation, it actually pulls heavy metals, contaminants out of the soil or out of our bodies. They're easily digested into the root system. So this is really important to understand. Without living organisms, you don't have compost. Without living organisms that further break down the soil and minerals in the body, the roots of the plant can't uptake the minerals to get it into the rest of the plant. So for the minerals to get into the stems, into the leaves, into the fruit of the food, of the plant, it has to be absorbed through the root hairs, and it has to be broken down by living organisms, by soil organisms. Exactly the same in the human body. So we have villi, which are these little hair-like structures. They're like roots. They break down nutrients further. That's our digestion, and they uptake it to distribute it to every part of the human body. This is why what you eat really matters. This is why digestion is so critical. And that's why you might have heard, if you're in the health circle, you've heard that funny phrase here. It's not what you eat, it's what you digest and assimilate. So it's all about digestion. You know, you hear you are what you eat. Well, it's all about digestion. So these living organisms are critical for that. They carry trace minerals into the tissues, increase oxygen and energy levels. So it oxygenates the soil. They oxygenate our bodies. Minerals oxygenate the body. Release natural antibiotics to protect against foreign invaders. When I saw this, I was like, wow. But it only makes sense. Do we not think that God has created a way for plants to be healthy in the natural world? Do we not think plants have to fight off viruses and fungus and parasites? They do that by creating natural antibiotics, which these living organisms do that. Our bodies, if you learn, I didn't even put this in the notes, it just occurred to me. The living bacteria in our bodies actually produce hydrogen peroxide, which kills infectious and pathogenic organisms in our body. They produce oxygen, they produce minerals, they produce natural antibiotics to protect us. So if we understand this, we'll start to realize that we don't need a man-made system of medicine, that God has figured all this out from the beginning. We just haven't either learned it, or if we learned it, we've buried it, and it hasn't become mainstream. But luckily, a lot of this stuff is becoming mainstream. But I thought that was fascinating to know that plants create natural antibiotics, which only makes sense. This is why plants that are grown in their natural environment on a mountain or in the woods are so much healthier, because they're resistant, they're strong. I'm big on, like, oregano as a natural antibiotic. Well, why is oregano so powerful? It grows in the mountains of Turkey over 5,000 feet. It has to fight the elements. It has to resist, you know, the different things that are thrown out of it. It makes the plant strong, unlike our factory farming today, which makes plants weak. There's an electrical charge. So minerals and soil organisms have electrical charge, a negative charge, that attracts and binds toxins and pulls them out of the body. And it helps with the communication between cells, and it helps with the permeability of cells. So cells, to be healthy, they have to get nutrients into the cells, and they have to get toxins out. And minerals and living bacteria are critical for that function. I highlighted this last point because I think it's pretty important. He said, now again he's talking about soil, soil's deficient in humic substances. Humic substances are decomposed plant matter. They may contain adequate iron. However, the iron is frequently bound in forms that render it unavailable to plant roots. So think about how many people are anemic. You hear about anemia, iron deficiency. Well, anemia is not iron deficiency. It's a lack of oxygen getting to the red blood cells. Very, very rare that somebody's not getting some sort of iron in our diet. I mean, iron is 0.1% of the makeup of the human body. You don't need a lot of iron. So if somebody's anemic, they have a toxicity condition that's not allowing the iron to be utilized by the body, or their digestion is so poor from processed foods or who knows what, that the iron can't be absorbed and used by the body. So it's not an issue that's resolved by throwing lots of iron at it. It's an issue that's resolved by putting the right minerals, oxygen, living organisms, things in our body that break down, process, digest food properly so the body can uptake the minerals properly, just like it would in a plant. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So I was explaining this to my wife, and I'd kind of looked at this article, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Look at what these plant minerals do, and it feeds these organisms. It's like the human body. This is so awesome. And I'm telling her all this, and she goes, oh, so basically you're telling us we need to drink compost. And I went, yeah, that's exactly it. And that's a supplement that we have. It's plant minerals. It's in a liquid form. It comes in a big gallon jug. Go to any health food store. It's all the rage. People are talking about humic minerals and fulvic minerals, plant-based minerals. This isn't nothing new to God. It's new to us. But it is. It's like liquid compost. It's awesome. I think that's hilarious. B, a healthy, fertile soil must contain sufficient mineral compounds to sustain the billions of microscopic life forms. A living soil is a fertile, healthy soil. So the same things that will damage soil and damage the living organisms in the soil will damage our bodies. What have we done to plants and the soil with herbicides and pesticides and insecticides and fungicides and suicides, as David Wolf says? Just thought I'd throw that in there. But all these organism-killing chemicals we've created have also destroyed the living organisms. What are we doing to our bodies? With man-made pharmaceutical drugs and birth control pills and antibiotics and antibacterial soaps and things that sterilize the body. We're killing all of our living organisms. So what we're doing to the plants and what we see happening with farming becoming such a disaster is one of the same reasons our bodies are becoming such a disaster. Because of the choices we're making in how to do medicine. So antibiotics are the biggest contributor to that, and we will talk more about that. 3, the immune system. So we're going to talk about the immune system. I'm going to go over this fairly briefly because it can get incredibly complicated, but there's a lot to go through. But how does a plant build a natural immunity? We talked about it a little bit. It's got to have strong nutrients, survive, and brave the elements. But it cannot have strong immunity without proper nutrition. And I'm going to give some examples here. GMO crops, monocrops, and NPK fertilizers. We talked about NPK last time, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, pretending like that's all a plant needs and it looks green and it looks pretty and it's fine. No, that's not going to be a healthy plant. It's not going to have all the minerals and it's going to strip the soil. But we've been doing that since the 20s. GMO crops we're familiar with, genetically modified organisms. That's messing with God's original design. And that is messing with genetics. You don't mess with genetics. Okay? Monocrops is a little different. It's not genetic modification, but what it is, it's kind of like hybridization where you find... Here, let me give you an example. This will make sense. Johnny Appleseed. Heard of him, right? He went through across the country planting all kinds of apple seeds and apple trees. Do you think all those apple trees that grew and all that fruit that grew was very sweet? No. Apples are actually very bitter and very sour. There's very, very few varieties of sweet apples. So as these apple trees were growing, hundreds, thousands of apples were coming forth that were not tasty. And the 3, 4, 5 that they found were like really yummy. They said, how do we recreate these? Because what's interesting about apples is even if you take a sweet apple and you take the seed of that apple and create a new tree, it's not going to create that same apple. So this is why they have to splice trees. Have you ever seen where a branch is split and it's grafted in? Okay, that's biblical. They talk about grafting in olive trees. But grafting into the tree will create that exact same type of apple. But what you're doing is you're weakening the genetic diversity of the plant. I talked a couple classes ago, or last class, about the potato famine and why that happened. So when you alter genetics, or you don't allow genetics to run their course to create new, healthy, different plants all the time, just like with people, the genetics of the plant gets weak. And when the genetics is weak, the plant is weak, and it makes it susceptible to funguses, insects, different types of diseases. This is why the average apple is sprayed with 200 different chemicals, because it's so weak. The genetic diversity has been lost because we want to eat the same sweet, shiny, perfect, pretty apple every single time. And that's what we look for in the grocery store. But if you've ever shopped for apples at the farmer's market, you'll find that they're not so pretty because they're supposed to be that way. So monocropping, creating the same apple over and over, the same potato over and over, genetic modification, not using full spectrum minerals with fertilizing our plants and our soils, that's going to make weak plants. that's going to make weak immunity, and if we eat those foods, it's going to make a weak us. So this is why we have to eat real whole foods. Like plants in the soil, our intestinal tract serves this same function in the human body. So we have to have minerals and oxygen and living organisms to function properly, just like a plant. So I'm going to make the distinction here of soil, and how soil is kind of the medium that provides all the nutrients to the roots of the plants. Our intestinal tract. Our intestinal tract is like that soil. Our intestinal tract is where nutrient uptake happens, where water uptake happens. And what's interesting is our intestinal tract, and I kind of give the funny example like a hole in a donut, it's in our bodies, but it's actually separate from our bodies. It only allows certain things into our lymph, into our bloodstream, and things that are supposed to be there, and anything that shouldn't be in the rest of the body, it should neutralize, take care of, and eliminate. This is now why they say that 80+% of your immune system is your gut, because that's your first line of defense on who should get in and who should not get in. So we have to have a healthy environment for all these functions to take place, whether it's the soil. Who's killed a plant here? Right? Who hasn't? I mean, everybody's killed a plant. And something went wrong, right? The oxygen wasn't right, it wasn't getting sunlight, didn't get the right minerals, something went wrong. Same comparisons to the human body. It just takes us longer. We're a little more resilient, right? We can kill plants pretty quickly. Sometimes it takes a while to kill us. So we just kind of do it slowly sometimes, not realizing it. But the roots are the key. So the soil is critical to have a good environment so that the roots can uptake the nutrients, but it's the same in our body. Our intestinal tracts, like our soil, the roots that do the digestion in our intestinal tract, it's critical for the life of our bodies, just like a plant. So, B, digestion's critical component to a healthy immune system. Your gut is like a compost bin. That's how it works. You have acids like stomach acid that break down the food, and then as soon as it gets into the intestinal tract, into the small intestines, you got all these trillions and trillions of living organisms that's digesting your food and breaking it down like a compost bin. Sounds funny, but that's the way it works. I think it's cool. Living organisms should be breaking down and digesting your food. Quality nutrients should be passed through the gut wall to nourish the body. But for nutrients to be passed through into the rest of the body, they have to be broken down further by living organisms. That's what breaks down the food. That's what finishes the process of digestion so that you can uptake nutrients properly. So again, this explains why you can eat something that contains iron but not get it into your body because you don't have good, healthy gut flora or good living organisms in your gut. So digestion cannot occur, I highlighted it, digestion cannot occur without healthy living bacteria known as gut flora. Unhealthy digestion, damaged gut flora is a huge reason why we have chronic health problems today. We can't digest our food. So think about all the reactions people are having to different types of protein molecules. Casein, found in dairy. Gluten, found in wheat products. Nuts, a lot of people have nut allergies, peanut allergies. There's protein molecules that aren't getting digested and broken down into the body, and if they don't get broken down by the body, it can cause an immune system response. And it's the job of healthy intestinal flora to break those proteins down so that they're absorbable and usable by the human body. So we're going to talk about our intestinal tract as the immune system, as the defender of our castle. So if our body is our castle, the intestinal tract is the defender of our castle. It's like the walls of our castle. So hopefully you got a moat with a bunch of alligators and a big drawbridge, and you want to have good defense, right, if you're trying to protect your castle. So the first line of defense of your castle is soldiers. Soldiers are trained. They go to school, they learn how to fight, they learn how to do hand-to-hand combat. These are your primary defense mechanism for your immune system, for your castle. Inside the castle, we have civilians. We have the civilians that are making bread and making candles and making shoes and doing all kinds of other really, really important functions. but they're not trained to be soldiers. They are trained to do the tasks that they're designed to do. And they don't have the training to be soldiers. And so ideally, we don't want them fighting battles for us. We want our soldiers that are trained to fight battles, fighting battles for us. If they're forced to fight, they'll do the best they can. But instead of being trained on hand-to-hand combat, so just get a visualization of this. You have somebody trying to break into your castle, and one of your knights takes on that guy one-on-one, and he kills the guy. Well, let's say they get through your first line of defense, and all of a sudden they're coming up to your civilians. One of their knights is coming up to your civilians. Is one guy with a pitchfork going to take him on? No, the only way is for you to mob that guy with like 12 guys, jump on him, and disable him. That's your second line of defense. We don't want that to happen. So now we're going to use that analogy of how the immune system works. So our first line of defense, it's called Th1 immunity. So there's Th1, Th2. It actually goes to Th5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's way complicated. We're going to just go very simple here. Th1, your first line of defense, your trained soldiers, is the mucosal linings of your intestinal tract. So your mouth, your gut, your private area, there's a mucosal lining throughout your entire body that helps neutralize and deal with foreign invaders. And they do it very well and very effectively. So, piece of cat hair, piece of pollen, something floats in the body that's not supposed to be there, you don't even know it. Because this immune system, strong immune system, takes care of that. Oh, that's not supposed to be here. See you later. Right? You don't even know that there's a problem. You don't even know something foreign has entered your body. That's how it's supposed to work. So this first line of defense, they're the trained soldiers. I'm on E. They're responsible for protection against the environment. So anything, even weird things that we put in our body, like soda pop and artificial flavors and colorings and all these chemicals, this first line of defense should be able to take care of those things. I give a little process. I'm not going to go into detail on it, but bifidobacteria, which are a type of living organism, it activates the immune system, something called lymphocytes. Lymphocytes protect the gut wall from invaders, from infectious organisms, and they produce immunoglobulins. Not an easy word to say. So IgA. You've probably heard this term if you've been in the medical industry, or if you've done allergy testing, you've heard about IgA, IgE, IgG. But the IgA is produced in the mucous membranes. So again, this is secreted through our bodily fluids. This is why we have saliva and mucus and different things to handle foreigners. Breathing passages, nose, throat, bladder, urethra, vagina, saliva, tears, sweat, colostrum, breast milk, mucous membranes. So this is all part of this first line of defense. Let's go to G. I just make the point here that when your gut flora is damaged, the important players, the main soldiers of your defense, is weakened. And this makes for a compromised immune system. The immune system is only as strong as your gut flora. Now, that's a fact. If you don't have healthy intestinal living flora in and on your body, it's impossible to be healthy. It's impossible to be alive. So, Th2 immunity, the second line of defense, remember these are the untrained civilians. They're responsible for protecting the body fluids, so the blood and the lymph. These are your fluid systems of your body. When your gut wall, when your first line of defense becomes compromised, when it gets damaged, when their soldiers break through and kill your soldiers and get into your civilians, you have a problem. They're not equipped for that fight. They're not equipped for that battle. And the only way they can even attempt to do it is through mobbing the invaders. So our gut wall gets damaged. How does it get damaged? Oh, about 100 ways we'll talk about later. And we're going to talk about all the different things that damage our gut flora because it's really important to understand that. But when our gut flora gets damaged to the point where our immune system is broken down, compromised. Sometimes we even get what's called leaky gut, if you've heard of that. We actually get holes in our intestinal tract. So now foreign weird things that enter our body aren't neutralized and handled by the first line of defense. They get into the blood. They get into the lymph. That forces an overactive and overstimulated immune response. This is autoimmune diseases. So anytime you hear of an autoimmune disease, the body attacking itself, God didn't create a body that attacks itself. Everything that happens in the human body is for a purpose, for our benefit. So when that autoimmune reaction is happening, the civilians are now trying to fight a battle they can't fight. And it's overactivating, overstimulating the immune system. This is why people are changing what they're eating. They're getting away from gluten-containing foods and dairy and things that are common allergens, because those things in their bloodstream will cause a hyperactive immune system, because they're not supposed to be there. Does that resonate? Okay. And so when you have this overactive immune system, this is chronic allergies. This is food sensitivity. This is people, well, one day I'm allergic to this food, and then I'm not, and one time it's okay, and the next time it's not, and well, if I eat a lot of it, then I'm allergic to it. You know, chronic allergies, chronic food sensitivities, that's a compromised immune system. This system has been compromised. This is when you can find, so IgA is in the mucosal linings. If you do a blood test and you find IgE and IgG type of antibodies in the bloodstream, that's when your first line of defense has been compromised, and now that's why these types of protein molecules are now found in the bloodstream. And that's how they check to see if people's immune system has been compromised, and this is like allergy testing. I mean, a lot of people have had allergy testing, so they know what that is. But if you have these food sensitivities, that can cause a variety of different health issues, but know that your castle wall has been breached. I'll use my dad as an example, just for fun. He's been allergic to cats and cat hair for, how long, Dad? 20, 30, 40 years? Whole life, pretty much. And it seemed to get a little bit better every time we'd go to Grandma's house, because Grandma has a cat. And we just went up to Iowa for Thanksgiving. And he was in house with cat, and zero reactions whatsoever. And that's cool to know that, because they say that, well, if you have allergies, there's nothing you can do about it. You know, take these drugs the rest of your life, take Claritin, all this stuff. No, if you strengthen your body, strengthen your immune system, my dad's doing the right things. He strengthened his immune system to the point where his first line of defense is taken back over. And he doesn't even know he's in the presence of cat hair anymore. That's cool, right? Awesome. Yes, that's how it's supposed to work, if our defense, if our immune system is functioning properly. So K, allergy testing is problematic. Now, allergy testing can be good because you know your immune system's compromised, there's things getting in there that shouldn't be, but it's very inaccurate. It's going to be different every time you test it. I know people that have spent thousands of dollars on allergy testing. It doesn't really tell them much. It just tells them their immune system's compromised. Now, it might tell you what you're most allergic to, so it's maybe good to stay away from those things, but the bottom line is if your immune system's been breached, your gut's been breached, it's time to go on a restrictive diet, whether you like it or not, because now everything that goes in your mouth is getting into places it shouldn't be. And this is why people are so drastically having to alter their food, clean up their personal care products, clean up their cleaning supplies, and change their whole world, because now your immune system's compromised. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. When our immune system breaks down, opportunistic, unhealthy organisms can overtake our body. This is why people get chronic infections. Organisms normally contained at healthy levels in the body, such as Candida. Did you know you all have E. coli in your body that's healthy, that serves a good purpose? Okay, these are opportunistic bacteria that serve a useful function in the human body that only become problematic when our bodies are unhealthy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that more in a minute. So the body's now more prone to invading organisms, foodborne bacteria, things you can pick up on food, and they can literally take over the entire body. They can take over organs, and they can consume the body. A lot of people will know this when they have fungal infections, yellowing of their nails. That's a chronic systemic infection that's gotten into the bloodstream. I see you looking at your nails. Living organisms in our body serve the same function they do in nature. If we have unhealthy, sick, diseased tissue in the bodies, organisms will try to break down and recycle that tissue. I don't know if that hit home, so I'm going to re-emphasize that. If you have a sick, unhealthy, diseased organ in your body, it will attract bacteria that are trying to break it down and recycle it. So, gallbladders. People have gallbladder surgery. When the doctor goes to take it out, it is just a pocket of infection. Think of an appendix. What's an appendix? What happens? It gets infected. If it gets too infected, it'll burst. And that'll spread that infection throughout the entire body into the bloodstream. I know people who all their health problems started after they had appendix burst in their body. So if you have a sick gallbladder, if you have sick lungs, if you have sick parts of the body, it will attract bacteria that are doing what the job of bacteria is, to break down things that need to be recycled. So this is why we got to promote health in our bodies. I give the example of a fish tank. Most people have owned a fish tank. A lot of people have owned a fish tank. And there are certain things you need to have a healthy fish tank. Has anybody seen Nemo? Okay, I have a 2-year-old daughter. I've been watching that a lot lately. Nemo, the way they were trying to escape in their fish tank is they had to disable some part of what made the fish tank healthy for the fish tank to become unhealthy. So to have a healthy fish tank, you have water has to be flowing, there has to be oxygen, there has to be some kind of a light or a sun lamp or something that mimics sunlight. The pH has to be right, there has to be minerals in the water, right? So it's the same as our body. The environment has to be right. So when something goes wrong, the fan gets stopped like they did in Nemo, or the light goes out, or whatever, the fish tank starts to get unhealthy. It starts to grow unhealthy organisms when the water gets stagnant. And the fish start to get sick. So what do? You pull out the fish and you operate on them and try to fix their lungs, right? No. You fix the water. You fix the environment. You get oxygen back into... See, do you see the parallel I just made to modern medicine? Wow. Okay, they just want to cut it out or cover it up. They don't want to actually fix the environment. That's the problem, is an unhealthy environment. Infectious organisms, infectious bacteria have never been the problem. God created those from day one for a specific purpose and function on the earth. But we don't understand them. In addition, if you have foreign material in the body, it'll also attract infectious organisms and try to break it down. If you have mercury in your body because you have a mouthful of fillings, if you have formaldehyde in your liver because you drank diet soda, which contains aspartame, which turns into formaldehyde, which pickles your liver, and is a type of wood alcohol, it'll attract parasites into your liver. So all these foreign weird things that are in our food supply and in our world today that aren't designed to be in the human body are attracting bacteria to break it down because that's how God designed it. And this is why so many people are struggling with chronic infections and can't figure out why, and the only solution being offered to them is antibiotics. The role of gut flora. How are we doing? Oh, pretty good. What is gut flora? So we've kind of talked about how it breaks down your food, digestion, it's like part of your compost bin. It is your immune system, these living bacteria. It's what decides who gets in, who gets out, who's a good guy, who's a bad guy. So it's a physical barrier to prevent colonization by pathogenic or infectious microbes. In other words, the layer of bacteria that lines your intestinal tract from your mouth all the way to the other end is so thick, it should be impossible for any infectious organism to get in and to replicate. That's how it should work. It communicates with the immune system, teaches it how to destroy who's good, who's bad. How does the body have intelligence to know what's a good organism and what's a bad organism? Well, it's communication that happens within the gut flora that makes that happen. Gut flora contains genetic code. Now, not our DNA. It has its own genetic code. and they actually have shown that it has 100 times more genetic code than we do. Gut flora is very intelligent. It has genetic code, and it communicates with the body to help it produce different parts of the immune system. So when you produce different parts of your immune system, a lot of that's produced in the bone marrow. You might have heard that. Bone marrow, it produces white blood cells. It goes to the thymus and different parts of the body. It goes to school. Okay, it goes to the gut. It goes to the thymus. How does it know who is a T cell and a killer T cell and a macrophage and a lymphocyte? Cells have to go to school to learn that. And part of that training happens through having good, healthy intestinal flora in our gut. They train our immune system and tell them who's good and who's bad. The average adult has about 5 pounds worth of bacteria in our bodies, and it is 90% of the human body. I know, it's hilarious, isn't it? Intestinal flora is critical to breaking down and digesting food. We've talked about that. They're critical for natural formed bowel movements. If you can't break down and compost your food, how are you going to have a healthy bowel movement? That's why people take probiotics and they notice their gut improves, their digestion improves, their bowel movements improve. They help synthesize and produce vitamins. I really wanted to talk about vitamins this class because I couldn't do it last class because there was too much, but I can't do it this class either. So when we talk about food next time, I'll try to throw in vitamins because it's important too. But what's cool about healthy intestinal flora is they produce vitamins in your gut. Vitamin K, produced in your gut by healthy intestinal flora. B vitamins, produced in your gut by healthy intestinal flora. So, B. If good flora is absent, what is present? So, the bacteria in your gut should be so thick, there's no way pathogenic organisms should get in there. But if we destroy our living bacteria, we call them opportunistic bacteria. So again, Candida, it's living in your body. E. coli, it's living in your body. But when your healthy guys are gone and your immune system is weak, these start to grow out of control and start to take over your body. That's why they call them opportunistic. They see an opportunity to grow and to flourish. That creates a healthy unhealthy environment in our bodies. I'm going to give an example, H. pylori. People have heard of H. pylori, right? H. pylori is a bacteria, and when the immune system's weak, and this is actually an example of how important stomach acid is because it's a critical part of our digestion, but I'm just going to give an example of how an opportunistic bacteria can take over. Stomach acid is supposed to be acidic, about 2.5 pH, because it should destroy any pathogenic organism that goes in our body, and it starts the digestive process. When our stomach acid's weak because we took antacids for years or we eat sugar or something that dilutes our stomach acid, it can promote an environment in which infectious organisms can take over. And that's H. pylori would be a prime one that happens in the stomach. H. pylori, when it gets in the stomach and it starts to replicate, it starts to produce ammonia. Ammonia is a very alkaline substance. The reason it produces ammonia is because pathogenic organisms survive and thrive in an alkaline environment. So it'll produce ammonia, it'll totally dilute and wipe out so you have no stomach acid, and it'll completely take over your stomach. Now again, the only treatment is antibiotics. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. They can cause more harm than good sometimes, and we'll talk more about that. But this is an example of how antibiotics not the solution. It's strengthening your stomach acid, it's strengthening digestion, and it's strengthening the healthy flora in your gut. So anytime you have a gut issue going on, it's always going to be important to strengthen your healthy intestinal flora. Otherwise, the opportunistic guys can take over. Candida is a huge problem. It's a chronic issue. A lot of people don't know it unless they've experienced it, but a lot of people are really struggling with Candida, which is normally kept in check in a healthy body, but can literally grow out of control in an unhealthy environment. And what do unhealthy organisms live on? Sugar. Sugar and starch. There's a lot of research that shows all cancers are a pathogenic organism, either a bacteria or a fungus or a virus or a parasite. Huge amount of research that cancer is from infectious organisms. And we've all heard sugar feeds cancer, sugar feeds cancer. Sugar feeds dangerous infectious organisms that are taking over our body. That's one of 1,000 reasons not to eat sugar, but a big one, a big one. So now we have a compromised gut and a compromised immune system, so we're going to have digestive issues. We're not going to digest our food, we're going to bloat, we're going to have gas, diarrhea, and or constipation. Colic I mentioned because colic's not normal. Okay, we assume, or we kind of have this attitude that colic's so common among our children that it's just normal and they'll just grow out of it and don't really worry about it. No, it's a sign of a problem. Everything that happens with the body is a signal, it's a symptom. So it's a sign of a digestive problem. Colic is digestive problems. So we need to look at what mom's eating if she's breastfeeding or what the child is eating, because something that the child is consuming is not agreeing with the system causing these colicky type of symptoms. Food allergies, craving only sugar, starches, and carbohydrates. Fecal compaction, inflammatory bowels, resulting health conditions. D would be asthma, ADD, ADHD, autism. Learning disabilities, dyslexia, dyspraxia, allergies, eczema, malnutrition, bedwetting, thrush. Chronic infectious issues, cystitis, sinus infections, UTIs, yeast infections. We know this is a major problem for many, many, many people. I mean, most, I don't want to say all, but I'd say the vast majority of people have taken an antibiotic at some time in their life. So we know infectious organisms are in our bodies and living in our bodies. It's interesting that this all starts in the gut, and this is all about the gut and the healthy intestinal flora in the gut, but you see the resulting health conditions that can come from a compromised gut. And there's many health practitioners throughout history that said all disease begins in the gut. I mean, Hippocrates said, for all health conditions, look to the spine and look to the bowels. He knew that if you looked at the intestinal tract and the spine, the two main root systems of our body, that is the link to every health issue going on in the human body. So addressing the gut, addressing digestion is going to be huge. Psychological disorders, I'm going to touch on this a little bit. Schizophrenia, bipolar, huge gut-brain connection. I will never forget a story I heard one time about a lady whose responsibility it was to watch certain mental patients in her home. So she had to really keep an eye on them and make sure they were not hurting themselves and they were functioning okay. So one day she fell asleep and one of her schizophrenic patients escaped her house. And so she got really worried, concerned. She called the cops, she put up posters, and this person was missing for almost a week. The person, the schizophrenic person, showed up after a week at her back door, knocked on the door, and I don't know her name, or I wouldn't use her name, but she said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I've been gone for a few days, but I'm back and I'm fine now." She's perfectly normal. She wasn't schizophrenic anymore. What had happened is she had wandered out back, fell into a hole in the yard, and didn't eat for 7 days. It cured her schizophrenia. So fasting, we haven't got to fasting yet, but fasting is a way to heal all diseases, because fasting is a way you take stress off the digestive tract and you allow the digestive tract to heal. And if you heal the digestive tract, you're going to heal the rest of the body. So there's a huge, you've heard the gut-brain connection, that the gut's the second brain. People who are having success with autism and psychological disorders are addressing digestion. They're addressing nutrition. So you can do other things, but nutrition is definitely a key component. Psychological disorders come from either not getting nutrients through our root system into the brain and into the body, or even worse, compromised gut, compromised immune system. Toxins are now getting into the body, getting into the brain, causing dysfunction. And I've said that for years, that there's only two reasons people are sick. There's something in the body that God didn't design to go in the body, or there's something that God did design to go in the body that's missing. Like your minerals, your probiotics, whatever. I mean, that in a nutshell explains all sickness, or the vast majority of sickness, I should say. If children are picky eaters, and all they will eat is sugar, starches, and carbohydrates, there's a major digestive issue. And that's a huge problem today, with kids only eating a couple of foods, and usually it's some kind of starchy food. It's a digestive problem. ADD, ADHD, get away from the sugared cereal and all the sugar for breakfast, give them proteins and healthy fats and greens, and they change. Their behavior change. Because it's not a problem with the child. They don't have a brain disorder. They don't have a behavioral disorder. They don't have a Ritalin or a pharmaceutical drug deficiency. They have nutrition problems. Birth of your immune system. I think I'm really going to have fun with this one. A healthy immune system starts before birth. Before birth. The immune system of the baby is dictated by the strength of the mother's immune system prior to birth. Babies are born with an immature immune system, and the gut flora must be established within the first 20 days of life. The two ways the immune system is originally established is either through the mother and or the environment. Hopefully they receive both. And I give an example of the ideal scenario, but I want to stress that mom's health is critical to the baby. This is quote-unquote genetics, but genetics is just, are we giving the building blocks that God designed for the human body and passing those on to our children? It's the blueprint. Are we passing down a good blueprint, or have we messed up the blueprint? So genetic issues can be easily reversed by putting the right things in the body that should have been there in the first place. Not all. Some, it starts in the womb, causes a genetic defect, and it can be harder to overcome those once that defect is set in. But still, we have to provide the right building blocks to the body. I can't stress enough how important it is that a healthy baby starts with mom and starts before she even gets pregnant. Think about it this way. Think about our culture today. It's crazy to me. The lack of understanding, really respect for the human body, our children. We find out we're pregnant, and then when we find out we're pregnant, all of a sudden we stop drinking and smoking and eating processed junk food because we want to take care of the baby. Why wouldn't we do that all along? By the time you find out you're pregnant, you know how far that baby's already developed? Their brain and their spinal cord is developing and their heart's already beating while you were eating junk food? In ancient cultures that didn't have processed food, it didn't exist, they didn't have machines to manipulate their food supply, they had women eat a specific diet for 2 years before they even got pregnant. That's how much they value life. So it really bothers me because I realize how deep-rooted our selfishness is, and just wanting to please ourselves and eat whatever we want and do whatever we want, and oh my gosh, if we get sick, what can I do to fix it and not be in pain? We don't even think about our kids. And that's a tough message for people to hear, but it's true. We need to be thinking about future generations. Why did ancient cultures care so much about the diet leading up to pregnancy, the diet during pregnancy? There were certain things you'd all probably, yeah, that's gross. But there were certain things that ancient cultures fed only to the pregnant women because it had the most nutrition, like shark eyeballs. See, it's funny. But these were sacred foods that contained unbelievable amount of power and nutrition that they gave to the pregnant women because it was so important that they had healthy offspring. And look at our offspring today. Look at our children today. And it sickens me. It's really sad. And I'm not, pointing fingers. It's our society. It's our system. It's not any one person, but it's time we wake up, and we make changes. So the ideal scenario would be a healthy mom, a vaginal birth, the first colostrum, and they're breastfed from the first day. No invasive drugs or chemicals introduced to the child. Child plays in the dirt and the soil and the farm from a young age. And child weaned off of breast milk onto healthy, nutritious foods. That seems pretty simple, but very rarely does that happen in our society today. B, the health of our parents is critical to the health of our children. The reason we're seeing so much ADD, ADHD, autism, allergies, etc. is the lifestyle choices we've made over the last 100 years. We have chosen this route. We have chosen the processed foods, the chemicals in our homes, the synthetic man-made pharmaceutical drugs, the pollution, the personal care products, the pesticides, the herbicides, the insecticides. We've chosen this, and we're seeing the result of it. It's a tough message for parents to believe that we're responsible for our children. And doctors don't tell you that. Oh, it's genetic, it just happened, it's just chance, it's a mystery. It's no mystery. There's no mystery on how God designed us on the earth and how He designed it to function. For parents to make changes, I think the first step is humility and just humbling ourselves to the point of realization that we're responsible and we have to do something about it. C, besides the health of the parents, the actual birth process is critical for the start of life. Unfortunately, pregnancy and the birth process has become a medical procedure. Very few women, doctors, or hospitals understand the human body, appreciate the natural birth process and the way God designed and intended it to work. How did women give birth for 7,000 years of human history? In hospitals? No. Who hospitalized birth? The United States did. It was fashionable for women to go to the hospital because they had money. So this whole system was by design. It was never how God intended childbirth to be. Having a natural drug-free vaginal birth is vital to having a healthy baby. This is how God designed it to work. Women have to learn to trust their bodies because the medical system will tell you that your body is prone to failure, you're prone to complications, and you need us to protect you and to save you if there's a problem. Now, there's instances where that's true, but the vast majority of it is not, and it's fear-based. And we need to get back to having healthy children in our homes, which is how God designed it. A vaginal birth is God's design. The baby should be flooded with fluids from the mother at birth. That only happens through a vaginal birth. These fluids should be in the mouth, on the body, in the intestinal tract, and this is how the healthy bacteria, these trillions of living organisms, the antibodies, other parts of the immune system are initially transferred to the child. This is how God inoculates children. Not with vaccines, not with needles, not through man-made intervention. This is God's natural design of how the baby, right from the start, builds a strong, healthy immune system. And it doesn't happen when you have a C-section. You miss it. And I've talked to a lot of women who had the first 2 children vaginally, had to have the third one C-section, and that third child is the one that struggles with health issues and immune system problems, or vice versa. So it really is a big deal having a vaginal birth. I have to make the point that there are times and situations where C-sections are necessary. They're life-saving. They save the mom. They save the baby. Unfortunately, way too many of them are not necessary. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more towards the end here. But I really want women to understand, any woman and man watching, you're part of the equation, right? Any woman watching this, you have to understand that the ideal scenario is a vaginal birth, because that literally sets the stage for that child's immune system from day one. And it's fashionable for famous people to prearrange a C-section like it's cool, to have a major surgery. Why? Because maybe they don't want to endure the pain or want to experience. I mean, this is what God designed women for, is to have children. How are we so fear-based that a woman wouldn't want to experience that? And the women I know that embrace that, yeah, it's hard, but they wouldn't change a thing than experiencing God's design for a natural childbirth. The first step after childbirth should be immediate skin-to-skin contact and the baby breast crawl. Babies should need no assistance in making their way to the mother's breast to begin breastfeeding. This is an opportunity for the baby to develop motor skills, to use its sense of smell. It stimulates the breast to produce more milk. It slows and stops the bleeding and increases the healing after birth. There's a reason that God designed things the way He designed them. Our medical intervention circumvents all of this whole process. Breast milk, F, is the most important part of the baby's early development. No comparison should ever be made between formula or animal milk and human breast milk. I say that because in the 60s and 70s, parents were convinced by their doctors that formula is better, that our company has made better than breast milk. I mean, how for 1 second could we believe that? That people fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. We fall for advertising, we fall for marketing, we believe what people say, and none of it's true. None of it's true. If you look at a chart, I've seen these lists that says human formula, baby formula, the dry powdered stuff, and the components of it, and then human breast milk. Well, the powder has a list about this many ingredients, which most of them are synthetic man-made ingredients that they just add to it, and it's usually like soy-based. And then what's contained in breast milk is like a list so long that they don't even know what's in there because it's from God. And it contains everything that the baby needs. Human breast milk is designed for a human baby. Cow's milk is designed for what? A baby cow. So I'm not railing on cow's milk or goat's milk, but I don't want people to assume that it's okay not to breastfeed, or it's okay to do formula, or it's okay to just do cow's milk or goat's milk, because it's not the same. Human milk's designed for human babies. So that's ideal. Now, when you wean your child and they have a strong digestive system and you want to do some goat's milk and that works for you, great. But it's not a replacement for human breast milk. And I think a lot of people who are big in raw milk think that. It's not true. In fact, if you look at Weston A. Price Foundation and they teach you how to make your own baby formula, they'll use the goat's milk or the cow's milk and you have to add about 10 other things. Why? Just to even remotely make it look anything close to human breast milk, because of how powerful and amazing human breast milk is. I like Psalm 22, 9 and 10. But you are he who took me out of the womb. You made me trust while on my mother's breasts. I was cast upon you from birth. From my mother's womb you have been my God. So it's not just about nutrition. It's not just about breast milk. It's about trust. It's about relationship between the mom and the baby. And when you go to a hospital and they take the baby away from you and they give it a bunch of shots and they quarantine it to make sure it's okay and safe for you to now touch your baby, it's wrong. G, breast milk coagulates in the baby's gut. Oh, this is fun. This is fun. Breast milk coagulates in the baby's gut, building up healthy bacteria and a strong immune system. If you were breastfed, you were fermented from birth. This is your best chance at a strong immune system. The first month of life is vital. A baby has a porous gut lining for the first few days of his life, allowing the colostrum literally to leak into every part of the baby's body to build the immune system before it seals up and creates that barrier, that immune system. That's why colostrum is so critical. Colostrum contains everything that that baby needs. They call it white gold. H. So, of course, I love to look through the Bible. Does the Bible talk about fermented foods? Yeah, the Bible actually talks about Jesus eating curds and honey. I haven't figured that one out completely, but it's fascinating to me. And they said he ate curds and honey so he's able to discern good from evil. I want that revelation. Like, God, give me that revelation. I'm praying right now. God, give me that revelation. I want to know what that means. But I'm going to go with this scripture in Job because I thought, there's fermented foods in the Bible. Job said, remember, I pray that you have made me like clay. We talked about that. Clay, minerals. And will you turn me into dust again? Did you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese? Clothe me with skin and flesh and knit me together with bones and sinews. So here Job is talking about the fragility of himself and the fragility of mankind, but he's also given us in the same breath insight into how we were designed. So I looked it up. I looked up curdled in the Hebrew, 7087 if you have a Strong's Concordance and you want to look it up. Kapha means to shrink, thicken, congeal, curdle, or settle. And cheese is gibbanah, which means curdled milk or cheese. So Job is literally saying here that you are fermented from birth. You are curdled out of the womb. So here's what we've learned happens. You're breastfed from birth. When breast milk enters your body, it's critical, good nutrition. And if it goes out of your body too fast, you're going to miss the nutrients. So what happens is there's actually nutrients called chymosin or renin. It's also called rennet. It's found in the intestines of all animals. It's even found in plants. It's an enzyme that curdles milk. So when you drink breast milk, the enzymes interact with the breast milk, curdling it, fermenting it, slowing its process down as it travels through the intestinal tract, filling it with living organisms that build your immune system. You are curdled from birth if you're breastfed. It's a protein-eating enzyme needed to digest milk. The main function of the renin enzyme is to curdle milk. If milk is eliminated without digestion, the baby doesn't get the full health benefits. It slows the digestive process. Here's what's cool. The optimum temperature to coagulate milk is 37 degrees Celsius, which is exactly 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, which is exactly the temperature that you need to turn animal milk into yogurt. The exact temperature of our human body. Do we not think God is a pretty brilliant designer? And why don't we know these things? Why do we have to dig through old literature and textbooks to learn these things? We should all know these things. It's critical for the life of our children. So here's the question. If we're fermented and coagulated from birth, and we have trillions of living organisms in our bodies, what are we doing with this information? We have to understand the difference between inoculation and sterilization. I alluded to it earlier, but I'm going to stress that what we're doing in our medical system, what we're doing with our crops, what we're doing with our food supply is sterilization. And it's what we're doing with antibacterial soaps. So when we use vaccines, antibiotics, acid reflux drugs, baby formula, processed foods, antibacterial soaps, we choose a hospital birth, which is like the worst of sterile environments, which is why there's so many super bugs and infections picked up in hospitals. Birth control pills and other man-made interventions, we are sterilizing our bodies and destroying the living organisms that live in and on us. So we're starting to realize that we have to work in cooperation with these living organisms and not try to eradicate everything, because it doesn't work. These things are all man-made. They're not natural to God's design. What makes matters worse is that we're introducing these types of interventions at the child's most fragile and vulnerable time of life upon birth. Instead of protecting our children, we're bombarding their immune system before it's even developed. So a couple of points I want to make here is simple things that we can use. So we think about a baby, a newborn baby. It gets an ear infection. It gets an eye infection. What are we doing to the baby? Antibiotics. Even as a baby. You know you can squirt breast milk in a baby's eye or a baby's ear and it'll immediately knock out the infection. You can use clay that we've already talked about. You can put hydrogen peroxide in a child's ear and he will never, ever, ever have an ear infection. So why are we using antibiotics? Man-made inventions don't have intelligence. So they force an action on the body. They rearrange molecular structures to force something to happen in the body. That can work. It can be a quick fix. But because there's no intelligence to those things, it's not cooperating and working symbiotically to have a good relationship with the human body. It circumvents God's design. So what babies need from birth is they need nurturing, vitamins, minerals, probiotics, the living bacteria. They need breast milk, a calm, loving home environment. And what are we getting today? Strangers running around, poking and prodding mom, people that she's never met. No privacy, a completely sterile environment. Vaccines upon birth. drugs to intervene to potentially speed up the birth process, C-sections if it doesn't work out, dulling the pain with medications, babies put in an isolated room, antibiotics at the first sign of a cold or ear infection, and formula lying about it, saying it's just as good as breast milk. This is what we're doing to our future generation, and look around. Look at how sick so many kids are. We no longer, unfortunately, trust God's processes. We have put our trust in man, and we have to turn our trust back to God. People think a hospital is a safe environment for a baby. I would argue that it is not. That a home environment that mom is used to, with her germs, her bacteria, her body, things that you're already familiar with, a relaxing, peaceful environment with the right music and the food you want after birth, and etc., is going to be a much safer environment than a hospital. And at a hospital, the baby's first exposure is to foreign germs, people that she's never met that who are harboring who knows what kind of infectious diseases that you don't know about. Unfortunately, home births aren't passed down from generations. We've hospitalized birth. In other cultures, do you know when they have children, they actually don't leave the home for months to potentially not expose that child to anything foreign that could potentially damage their weak, fragile immune systems? We take our babies to the doctor's office full of people that are sick, go to a pediatrician to get vaccines in them. It doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to talk a little bit about vaccines just because I think this is a good moment to talk about it. And I'm going to just give you my opinion on why my wife and I have chosen not to vaccinate. Because it's a controversial issue. To me, it's not controversial. It's common sense if you understand God and the way He designed us and the way He designed the human body. So the first thing is, we already talked about it. God has a natural way to build an immune system. We don't trust it. We don't understand it. We don't learn about it. We don't know about it. But that inoculation happens upon birth with these living organisms in our body. So that's the first reason, is I trust the way God designed our bodies and our immune system. A baby is very fragile upon birth. He doesn't have an immune system yet. So many babies aren't born properly, or there's intervention, and they're at this fragile state, and we're putting vaccines that we know to be toxic and we know have damaging substances in them at their most fragile time of life. And we're denying that babies are having vaccine reactions. Thousands and thousands and thousands of parents are crying out from vaccine reactions. You just don't hear it in the news. I have a little tiny office in a little tiny place in Kansas, and I've heard so many stories it would make your blood boil. If I'm hearing that many stories in my little tiny corner of the earth, can you imagine what it's like in the rest of the world? And it's completely covered up. MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella, is one of the main vaccines given to children. I would ask, when would a child be exposed to 3 different diseases in the exact same second in their life? Naturally. It would never happen. This is why MMR is the #1 vaccine linked to autism and other diseases. It's not natural. My concern is, why would I potentially put toxic chemicals in my child when most of these diseases we're trying to prevent aren't life-threatening diseases anyway? How many people die of measles or the chicken pox? These aren't life-threatening diseases, especially in a strong immune system. One of the biggest reasons we don't vaccinate is because you're circumventing God's design for the immune system. Remember we talked about Th1 and Th2 immunity? Th1 immunity is the mucosal lining. What are most infectious disease agents or infectious organisms? They're airborne. They're in the food. They go in our mouth. They go in our ears. They go in our nose. They go in our body, and the first line of defense, Th1 immunity, is responsible for figuring out what that is, deciding it's not good, and building up an immunity so that next time that comes around, it's immediately eradicated. This is how the body naturally builds an immune system. What do we do when we put a vaccine directly into the bloodstream or directly into the muscle tissue? We circumvent God's design of how we're supposed to encounter infectious agents. We're infecting the blood, which Leviticus 17 says, the life of all flesh is in the blood. And we're circumventing God's natural design to put foreign chemical agents directly in the bloodstream, bypassing the immune system 100%. There's no logic, there's no common sense to it. And it's not an argument if you understand these things. Remember, the Th2 immunity was the civilians who aren't designed to fight these battles. And we're directing chemical agents directly into that. Dead, partially dead, sometimes living viruses directly into an infant. Why are vaccine reactions such a big deal now when they didn't seem to be a couple of generations ago? I will tell you that I think that we are, my generation, I'm 40 years old, is the first generation that was fully vaccinated. So what I would ask is, what are our children looking like? Why the autism, the ADD, the ADHD, the dyslexia, the dyspraxia? What are you going to blame? The reason vaccines are causing so many problems today is because even 2 generations ago, we were fairly healthy. We lived on farms. We were in the dirt. We ate real foods. We don't anymore. We're 3-4 generations into processed foods, using man-made chemicals, using antibiotics, birth control pills, and now the vaccines are damaging the children because they've always been poisonous. But now the child's born with a weak immune system, and now the toxins are damaging the child. Does that make sense? It's also a myth that vaccines eradicated infectious disease. If you look at polio, measles, you look at any infectious disease, it was on its way out before the vaccine was introduced. That's all documented evidence. You can look it up. In fact, when they gave the polio vaccine in the 50s, they actually gave 100,000 people polio and reintroduced the disease back into America because they injected everybody with a live virus. So knowing just this basic information of how God designed the body to work and how dangerous these chemicals are in vaccines, what we've come to the conclusion of is that I would rather risk my child getting measles than know that I voluntarily contributed to damaging or killing my child with the vaccine. The risk of an infectious disease that's probably not life-threatening is way more worth it to me, especially with the stories I've heard. And I think if parents hear this, they'll start to seriously do their own research and second-guess the vaccine industry. So we could talk a lot more about that, but that's just a few tidbits, and I thought that might be a good point to mention that. So, and really one of the bottom line questions we can ask is, are they effective? Ask a doctor for a study or proof that vaccine will prevent what they say it's going to prevent. There's no proof. So if we don't even know that they work, and we know they're filled with toxic chemicals, why would we risk it on newborns who don't have an immune system? So it's one of those things where they're making their trillions and trillions of dollars, and when enough children are maimed and killed, and it's finally public knowledge, then it'll change. But it's just like with anything. When it's profit over people, it never happens unless it happens at the grassroots level. And that's why you're seeing such a pushback against vaccines right now. So Roman numeral 6, working with, not against God's natural created order. We're always growing and learning. If you look at the history of infectious disease, you of course can find it in the Bible. The Bible said, hey, we should wash our hands, we should quarantine this and that. And they were very specific on how to handle leprosy and other infectious diseases. It's always been a concern for humanity. Why are there good bugs and bad bugs? Why do some people get sick and some people don't? It goes back to that what I call the land and seed theory, the health of your body, the health of your fish tank. That's what's going to determine if we're going to get sick or not. In Leviticus B, God gave us clear instructions on how to handle infectious disease. We knew germs existed, and we knew that disease could be spread because the Bible told us so, yet we don't fully realize it or believe it until we can actually see it. And I'll make the funny point that I think mankind has always struggled in believing things he can't see, such as God, such as faith. But a good example of that is C. Dr. Semmelweis. He was actually boy, now I forget, he was Austrian or Hungarian. I think he was Hungarian. But he's nicknamed the Savior of Mothers. And I think I might have mentioned this in the last class, I'm not sure. But he had this theory that women were dying in the hospital because some invisible thing was being transferred to them and killing them. And all he was doing was asking doctors to please wash your hands between patients. They were examining bodies in the morgue, and then they were going to deliver children. And women were dying and children were dying. And when he suggested this, he was absolutely ridiculed. I mean, how can you believe in something you can't see, that's killing them, that doesn't even make sense? They laughed at him, ostracized him. He actually ended up leaving the medical profession. I think he died in an insane asylum. So this is how hard the pushback was against what turned out to be true. So because of this belief in something invisible, he was ridiculed. And today we see that. Many beliefs that go against standard medical beliefs are ridiculed and retaliated against. I say this jokingly, but I think there's a lot of truth to it, is the more I come to believe something and think it's true, and the more I hear the medical community and everybody else saying the opposite, I know I'm on the right track. Antibiotics were discovered accidentally in the 20s with penicillin. I have to make the point that antibiotics have been and can be life-saving, and they have been for thousands of people. When antibiotics were discovered, they thought they cured all infectious disease. I would say 100 years later, we're pretty far from curing all infectious disease. Now here's an interesting point. Remember I made the point that God creates things that are living and man creates things that are dead? Infectious organisms that live in our body, even the pathogenic, unhealthy ones, they have intelligence. They were designed by God. So when you put man-made antibiotics, all-purpose killers that destroy everything in the body, those germs are pretty smart because God made them, and they are going to resist that antibiotic, and they're going to change, and they're going to morph into something different. Robert O. Young was one who did it. There were other men who have done it, who look under a microscope, look at blood in a microscope, and see a bacteria changed into a fungus, into a virus, and into a parasite, and back, depending on the environment of the blood. So dirty blood, organisms change into more and more infectious, damaging organisms. Put oxygen and health back into the blood, it reverts back to a completely harmless bacteria that's coexisting in your body the way God designed it. So Dr. Semmelweis was ridiculed for this, but now we know, we have microscopes, we know that there's germs, there's bacteria, but unfortunately we thought, well, they're all bad, let's kill them all. And this was antibiotics. And now we've realized that, hey, there's good bacteria, there's bad bacteria, there's living bacteria. There's really no such thing as bad bacteria. It's just, are we living symbiotically in relationship with God's design and natural created order? I hate calling them bad, because they all serve a purpose. So antibiotics now, they're overused, they're overprescribed. They say upwards of 80% of antibiotics are unnecessary or overprescribed. And they hand it out like candy without even thinking about it, not even knowing if it's going to work. It's a total guessing game. I actually call it a game of Russian roulette, because they're really messing with people's lives and bodies and immune systems. And you're giving them, again, to children, just like the vaccines. You're giving these to newborn children. Their immune system's already born weak because we're not following the natural birth process, and then you're throwing antibiotics and other drugs on top of it. I'm going to make a point here. My wife brought this up, and I thought it was brilliant. We have to distinguish between things that are life-saving and life-giving. Antibiotics can be life-saving, but they're not life-giving. Does that make sense? When somebody has a heart attack, that's life-saving. But putting them on drugs the rest of their life is not life-giving. And this is one of the biggest confusing factors of our medical system, is there's good in it. There's life-saving in it that's needed, unfortunately, because we have a broken world, but it's needed. But that 1-2% that they do good should not give them free rein on the 98-99% of destruction of the human body that they're doing. So we need to not call life-saving drugs, we need not classify them as life-giving. We can't hand out antibiotics for everything, for every situation. Oh, if it doesn't work, come back, I'll give you a stronger dose. Oh, that didn't work, let's just try a different one. And the whole goal is just to make the bad thing go away, with no comprehension or understanding of what you're doing to the body or the long-term effects. Over 80%, this is E, of all antibiotics are actually used in the farming industry in sick and unhealthy animals. So factory farms are so disgusting, the animals are so sick that they can barely keep them alive with antibiotics. And if we eat these foods that aren't antibiotic and hormone free, if we eat meat at most restaurants, you're eating antibiotics and chemicals. And it's just another reason people have weak immune systems today. The number one thing, F, that will destroy your healthy bacteria and immune system is antibiotics. People are learning the hard way after years of antibiotic usage. These are some of the things that destroy your healthy living flora. Antibiotics is the number one thing that will destroy the good, healthy intestinal flora in your body. Birth control pills. Again, handed out, no big deal, not even thinking about the damage that you're doing to a woman in killing her healthy intestinal flora and potentially increasing cancer risk and potentially causing her to be infertile for her entire life. Any doctor handing out birth control either hasn't read the side effects or is just oblivious to the real dangers. But to me, it's just shocking how doctors will hand this out to teenagers. Antacids, pain drugs, including aspirin and Tylenol. Aspirin and Tylenol aren't innocent. They kill tens of thousands of people every year. They cause internal bleeding and kidney problems and liver failure. It's over the counter. That doesn't make it safe. It's still a man-made chemical that damages the human body. All man-made pharmaceutical drugs, they're all toxic to the human body. Herbicides, pesticides, we see that they do to the plants. We see what they do to the soil. They do the same to us. White sugar, white flour, pollution in our environment, chemicals in our food, and the stuff in our tap water, fluoride and chlorine. We know this is an issue because people are suffering from chronic infectious issues, reoccurring yeast infections, reoccurring UTIs. Let me give you an example of, well, you know what, I'll save that for the next part. So ear infections, candida overgrowth, bronchitis, pneumonia, we have chronic systemic infections in our body. We have low-grade infections in our body that's taking over our bodies, and we're feeding that with poor diet and putting man-made drugs in our body. And here's where I say it. We have little concept of the guessing game of Russian roulette being played with our bodies. I had a girl one time who came into my office who was diagnosed with Lyme's disease, and by the way, that's very often misdiagnosed. But she was diagnosed with Lyme's disease, and the treatment of choice by her doctor was to put an IV antibiotic. So antibiotics directly into her bloodstream. Now, I'm not saying he had bad intentions, but this IV antibiotics was administered to this girl a couple times a week for a year. Completely destroyed her immune system. Now, I made the point before, and I'm going to make it again, that you cannot survive without the living organisms that are in and on your body. Impossible to live, because you'd be consumed by pathogenic bacteria. You'd be consumed and broken down back into the earth. It's not your time yet. As soon as you die, immediately the body gets decomposed by what? Bacteria and parasites and fungus and everything else, because it's not living anymore. So if you sterilize your body and you kill your your healthy flora and your healthy organisms, you destroy your immune system. And that's what this girl couldn't go outside. She couldn't be around other people. I mean, she encountered any germ and she got sick. It's not the way it's supposed to be. And that's what antibiotics and drugs can do to the human body. The biggest danger with antibiotics is germ resistance. Remember that God created things that have intelligence. Living organisms have intelligence. They have the ability to change, morph, resist, and strengthen themselves against man-made synthetics. The things that God gave us, germs don't resist them because they have intelligence. Our lifestyle choices have further weakened our immune system, and this is why we're suffering from chronic infections. So it really depends on how healthy our body is, how healthy our lifestyle is. Let me give an example of what happens. I'm going to use sinus infections. Very common. A lot of people have dealt with sinus infections. I have people that come in I've had sinus infections for 20 years, I've had sinus surgery, I do the neti pot, I've dealt with this my whole life. Well, you should be able to knock out a sinus infection in like 3 days. And people deal with this stuff and take drugs their entire life because, again, the goal of the pharmaceutical industry is you be a lifelong customer, not to have freedom. God provides life and free gifts and freedom. So all the healing is from God. So you have a sinus infection. What's an infection? It's a living pathogenic bacterial organism that has taken root somewhere in your body. So if you have a sinus infection, you have bacteria in your sinus cavity. You take an antibiotic. Antibiotic kills some of the bad guys, also kills a lot of your good guys. And because the living bacteria made by God are smart and have intelligence, they morph, they change, they become strong and resistant to the next time that antibiotic enters the body, it doesn't affect them anymore. So now the stronger strain of bacteria morphs, changes into a fungus that's stronger. Then you do antibiotics again. Well, guess what? Antibiotics don't work against fungal infections. They only work against bacterial infections. Fungus is too strong. This is why people are taking strong antifungal drugs for some fungal issues, like the cycline family. You take more antibiotics, you take stronger antibiotics, you take different ones, you take an antifungal. You continue this germ resistance process. Each time the sinus infection comes back, it's worse. Why does it keep coming back? You haven't changed your lifestyle. The doctor hasn't told you that eating the sugar and the baked goods and the soda and the processed foods and the white bread and the white flour are feeding the infection in your body that's causing it to grow out of control. They don't teach you that. So you take an antibiotic, it goes away, then it comes back in 3 months, 6 months, and each time it comes back stronger. So now you have a deep-set, rooted fungal infection in your sinus cavity. What happens? You get sinus surgery. Just take it out. So what could you have done from day one? You could have strengthened your immune system with healthy living bacteria with probiotics. But the easiest way to knock out a fungal infection in the sinus cavity is oregano oil. Some type of essential oil. Sea salt works. But you put sea salt with some essential oils in your nose, it might sting a little bit. It kills fungus. And it doesn't create germ resistance. Because things that God created have intelligence. They kill the guys that shouldn't be there, but not your healthy guys. So this is why you can do a good sinus spray with essential oils, knock out this infection in a couple days, and you should never have to deal with that the rest of your life. But people deal with these kind of, and that's just one example. You could give the same example with yeast infections, urinary tract infections, chronic respiratory issues, on and on and on and on and on. Because we're treating the body with antibiotics. That's a quick fix, a temporary solution, causing long-term weakness and damage in the body. Don't think they don't know it. Don't think there's not really smart guys who work for the pharmaceutical industry going, hey, we can give these drugs and they think they're going to be better for a while, but they're going to get more sickness and more disease and we can sell them more drugs. I mean, do you not really think that's a part of their marketing plan? Of course it is. We're starting to realize that instead of fighting against all germs, we must work with God's natural created order. We need to understand how God designed the earth, plants, animals, humans, living organisms, and our immune systems. Much of what our medical system is designed to do is to work against nature, against our bodies, against germs, and against how the human body is designed to function. We look at symptoms as something bad to make go away. God looks at symptoms as something of, look, I'm trying to talk to you and communicate with you and tell you there's a problem. Would you please get back in alignment? But we kind of shut that door out and we say, okay, let's just get the quick fix here. If a man-made system of medicine doesn't include God's natural design and wisdom, it's destined to fail. And that's what we're seeing with antibiotics. Seemed to be the cure-all, it's now a failure. And I'm not saying there's not that 1 in 100 life-saving time where you need the antibiotic to save a life. It's there. But the other 80, 90, 99 times, it's not necessary. God's solutions, if we're looking for them, are many, but we have to look to God for our answers, and our medical system doesn't, because again, God's things are free. I bolded here because you cannot patent and make millions of dollars on things designed by God. That's why they're absent from our medical system. There's no money in oxygen. There's no money in probiotics. There's no money in eating dirt. I'm joking, but we talked about the clay. There's no money in these things that are free, that God wants to give us to have freedom. And so that's why they're not in our medical system. So you can use oregano, garlic, olive leaf, sunshine, oxygen, 1,000 different things to build the immune system. But, you know, what are we using? What of God's resources are we using? And who are we looking to for our answers? Isaiah 2:8. It's not in your notes. It says, their land is also full of idols. They worship the work of their own hands, that which their own fingers have made. We are worshiping the works of man's hands. And it's an idol. And until we turn back to God, we're not going to find our health again. Our future generations are going to continue to get sick until we wake up and realize that we're idolizing a man-made system that works against God's creation. It goes on in that scripture to say that the Lord will come against everything proud and lofty, and it shall be brought low. And God shall be exalted above all. I think it's awesome that clay from the earth and living organisms and fermented foods are going to bring low and bring to shame our entire medical industry. That's just God.
Yep. Amen.
To bring what we think is wisdom to nothingness. And it's starting. It's going to take a while. There's going to be a lot of fight, a lot of resistance. But God wins. We know that, right? We read it. We read the story. I just hope it happens in our generation. I think it will. It's starting. So, okay, if we've learned the truth that our immune systems are designed by God to function with trillions of these living organisms that we have to protect and strengthen, the honest question should be asked, are we changing our system of medicine to embrace this crucial information, or is it business as usual at the expense of our health? Why aren't doctors recommending probiotics? Maybe they really believe the antibiotic can help, and maybe it will. Why are they not recommending probiotics? Are they really looking at the person's condition to see if that antibiotic will work for that issue? And do you really know exactly what issue that person has? Because if you give them the wrong one or too strong a one, you're really going to damage their immune system. Doctors need to start caring about the way they're treating their patients. They're in a system. It's like a hamster wheel. So, and it's not, I don't want to put it all on the doctors, but you know, we need to really utilize this information. This is mainstream information. This isn't secret anymore. I mean, companies are advertising probiotics and yogurt, and we know that this is a real component of the human body. Why isn't our medical system embracing it? Well, we know why. They have another agenda. So building a strong immune system. Last section, we're going to do it. A, we have a generation of parents and children with weak immune systems. Man-made pharmaceuticals, pain relievers, antibiotics, antacids, birth control pills, have gone through that list. They have taken their toll. What steps can we take to reverse this process? Well, let's look at them. Number one, good nutrition before getting pregnant. Understanding that there are building blocks that the cells of the human body need for that baby to grow properly. Deformities have been created in animals on purpose by feeding them a nutrient-deficient diet, and they're born deformed. They're born blind. And when our children are born with deformities or clubbed feet or develop autism, we pretend it's mysterious or random or there's no answer. We just say it's genetic, and that's the end of the conversation. There's always a reason. If the woman, and part of it's the man, he's part of that genetic code. If you don't have the proper building materials upon conception, you can have a problem. So it's really critical to have proper nutrition before even getting pregnant. This is what all ancient cultures practice. We have lost that in our society. I have a whole class I did on pregnancy nutrition and children's nutrition when I did the GAPS diet series, and that's free on my website. So anybody who wants to learn more about pregnancy, all the different nutrients you need for pregnancy, all the different foods you can eat, there's a whole thing on that. Number 2, have a natural vaginal childbirth if at all possible. Consider a home birth. Read the statistics. Understand why America, with the quote-unquote best medical system in the world, has one of the worst infant mortality rates and mother mortality rates in the industrialized world. How can that even be possible? You don't hear about it. You're not going to hear about it. They're safer than hospital births. Home births are hands down safer than hospital births. Have an emergency plan, because there's going to be that 1 in 10, 1 in 20, whatever. You might need an emergency C-section if things don't go right. You want to have an emergency backup plan. But a home birth is safest. Don't let doctors induce early labor for their convenience. Who's seen the documentary Business of Being Born? Okay, 1 person, 2 people. Childbirth has become a business. And if a doctor wants to get home for dinner at 6 o'clock, he'll force labor. You're circumventing God's design. You're circumventing that child being ready to exit the womb. Drugs are often given, and a lot of times you lose your rights in a hospital. Oh, you've gone too long, it's time to induce. They just do it. They give you Pitocin, which is stimulating the birth process, but it causes such severe pain in women that they scream and cry out for the epidural, the pain drug that they were trying to avoid in the first place. So the Pitocin speeds up the birth dangerously to the baby, causes so much pain that the woman cries out for an epidural. The epidural halts the birth process. The woman is now yo-yoing back and forth between a drug that's trying to stimulate her and a drug that's trying to numb her, and she gets worn out, and it leads to a C-section. So although C-sections can be necessary, the vast majority of them are hospital-related early intervention that's completely unnecessary. And now we know that that's compromising the immune system of these children. Babies should go straight from birth to the mother's breast with 0 intervention. Nobody else should touch that child. No shots, no quarantine. That baby should go straight to mother's breast. Just like it says in the Psalms, you taught me to trust while on my mother's breast. Breastfeeding for at least 1 to 3 years, sometimes longer. Ancient cultures would breastfeed up to 4 or 5 years. I think 1 year is a bare minimum. But it's the first 3 months, the colostrum the first 3 weeks or so, and then the breast milk for the first 3 months, absolutely critical. It literally sets the stage for the health of that child and their immune system for the rest of their entire lives. Within reason, allow child to be outside and play in the dirt and mud. I said within reason. It exposes them to healthy soil organisms, 20,000 plus different organisms and 4 billion of them in 1 little teaspoon. This is what we're made of. It's okay to play in the dirt. Feed children healthy foods. Don't allow them to be addicted to starches and junk food. And I purposefully wrote Cheerios down as junk food, because most parents feed their children Cheerios thinking they're doing something good. It's starch, it's sugar, it feeds infection, there's no nutrition in it. I don't care if they add an iron into it because it's a new formulation. It doesn't make it good for you. It's all advertising and marketing. Children need to eat real whole foods. I'll give a plug here for a book called Super Nutrition for Babies. So if you want a good book on how to wean your child or on how to make your own formula in a healthy way, it's a book called Super Nutrition for Babies. Number 6, eat fermented foods daily and feed them to your children. Women who are breastfeeding can put probiotic powders on their nipples and get it into the baby. Our daughter, in her sippy cup with her water, she gets the life elements she needs for a healthy gut. We put in probiotics. We put in the plant minerals, the drink your compost, right? And we put in clay, and that's in her sippy cup in all the water she drinks all day long. So we're going to do everything we can to ensure that our child has the best start possible. And I'm going to just get a little personal with you right here. I'm not saying people have bad intentions, But people come up to us all the time knowing what we do and say, oh my gosh, you must have the healthiest child in America. Your child must be so healthy. And that bothers me. I'm going to tell you why. Because it's a battle. I've dealt with health issues. My wife has dealt with health issues. If for 1 second I'm going to assume that our child is going to have perfect health, I'm making a big mistake. I have to fight for my child's health because of what we've done to our generations of children. And so, although they might not have bad intentions, no, I don't think my child is the healthiest. But I'm going to do everything I know to do and follow God and His natural design to give my child the best chance. So I just wanted to make that point, that this is a battle. Even if you're into this stuff, it's a battle for our future generations. 7, take probiotics daily. There's transient and colonizing bacteria. Just in a nutshell, transient bacteria, that's fermented foods. That's most of the probiotics people take. They go into the body. They kind of feed your soldiers on the wall. They do a bunch of good things. They break down stuff, and then they leave. Colonizing bacteria are more of the soil organisms. There's a product called Prescript Assist. That's actually soil organisms. But this is getting stuff in the dirt, playing in the dirt, getting exposed to dirt, being on the farm, pulling vegetables out and not sterilizing them till you can't see a speck of dirt. Okay, we don't need to do that. We want to have healthy soil, but we don't need to completely sterilize everything. So colonizing bacteria come from soil organisms. I think it's funny. This is what our world's come to. I'm going to kind of summarize what our world's come to. If you choose the medical route, you get a quick fix, you probably damage your body long term, you weaken your immune system. We know there's better options. If you choose the natural route, because we don't live in conjunction with God's natural design and natural order, now we have to go to a health food store and spend $50, $70, $100 to buy and consume dirt. I mean, that's what our world's come to. We have to spend money on dirt and soil and clay to get healthy because we don't live within God's natural created order anymore. It's kind of sad. But at least buying the supplements is gonna make you healthy. You just have to pay for it. So, you know, I don't like it that I probably have a good, secure job for life. I don't like it. I wish we were all free. I really do. I wish we all knew this stuff and embraced this and got back to the way God intended things to be and we had freedom. I would rather have that than job security. Just want to stress that. 8, don't destroy the living organisms that are in and on our bodies. White sugar, white flour, antibiotics, all the things I've talked about so many times. All the antibiotics in the meat, personal care products, cleaning supplies, bleach, those kind of things, they sterilize everything. Provide a healthy environment for a healthy living gut bacteria. Take care of your mouth. That's a big one. I was actually praying about this, and I felt like the Lord wanted me to highlight this, so I'm going to mention it. I didn't even have it in my notes. Remember I talked about the intestinal tract, and bacteria, viruses, fungus get exposed to the body. They're supposed to be neutralized by the intestinal tract. Do you know why mouth issues and cavities are tied to heart disease? You've probably heard that and other health issues in the body. If you get cavities, you're actually having pathogenic bacteria bore holes through your teeth, into your gums, into your nervous system, giving bacteria a one-way system into your organs and into your bloodstream where they're not supposed to be. This is why the mouth health is so important. And this is why you want to take care of your mouth. And there are a lot of easy things you can do for that. Weston A. Price learned in his research that ancient cultures didn't have problems with their mouth. There were no cavities, there were no root canals, there were no crowns. Mouth problems is a sign of internal health problems in your body. Poor diet. There's no other reasons to have teeth are bone. Your bone shouldn't just deteriorate. You have to have a poor diet and poor lifestyle to have your teeth. And I've had cavities. Most everybody's had cavities. This is the world we're living in. But I want to stress that it's bacteria in your mouth that's getting into your body and into your bloodstream that can lead to heart disease and these other problems. So to take care of our mouths, we can do easy things like oil pulling, where you swish oil, coconut oil, olive oil, sesame oil, swish it for like 10 minutes, spit it out. That'll pull a lot of deep infections out of your body. I've seen that save people from getting root canals. Hydrogen peroxide kills bad bacteria and actually feeds healthy living organisms in our body. Baking soda is great, sea salt, and clay. These are all things that we've talked about that you can use in your mouth to keep your mouth healthy and keep bacteria from getting into the rest of your body. And you can stop the progression of your cavities if you don't have pathogenic organisms in your mouth. Take bentonite clay. That's going to keep pathogens out, keep toxins out. It also gives a nice, healthy medium for living organisms. Plant minerals every day. Drink your compost. Oh, I put it in parentheses there. Drink your compost. That feeds the healthy living bacteria in your body. Not only that, it provides all the plant minerals from the earth from which we're designed, all the trace minerals that the body needs to function. Greens provide healthy fibers, and prebiotics. Prebiotics is something that feeds your gut flora, your living organisms. So different fibers, different green foods, different minerals. Remember I said that they're living, they have to have food too. Fibers keep the bowels moving and keep bacteria healthy. So flax, psyllium, chia seeds, oats, oat bran, apples, different good fibers. Bone broth soups can be very healing and soothing to the gut lining and provide minerals. And oxygen supplements. There's ways you can oxygenate your body and your gut to feed and get oxygen to your healthy living organisms. Get outside in the sun daily and exercise. Fight infections naturally with God's endless resources. That's the last one. Colloidal silver, essential oils, ozone, which is a type of oxygen, hydrogen peroxide, oil of oregano. I will say oil of oregano is my favorite full-spectrum natural antibiotic. What's cool about God's antibiotics is they kill bad guys, not good guys. And oregano, I have a whole book of research on oregano, and they actually studied it against penicillin, and they introduced it to C. diff, E. coli, all these different pathogenic organisms. The oregano worked faster with no germ resistance. And again, God has the intelligence. The man-made things don't. The man-made things might seem to provide a quick fix, but there's no intelligence there. So one of the main points I want to make just to wrap this up is that we have to trust God's design. We have to trust the human body. We have learned and we have been conditioned to believe that everything that happens to the body is bad or wrong, and we need to suppress the symptoms. God is communicating to us through our bodies, and we have to listen. We have to pay attention to that. We have to work with these living organisms that are in and on our bodies. We feel like we have to stop every symptom, that that's something bad. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, that if we didn't have pain, if we didn't have symptoms, we'd all be dead because we would destroy ourselves. If we didn't have acid reflux, if we didn't have headaches, if we didn't have stomach problems that were so horrible that we actually had to stop doing the horrible things that are damaging our bodies, how long would we make it? I feel it's God's love and God's mercy that He designed us this way. Otherwise, we would just self-implode. So thank God for pain. Thank God for discomfort. If we can embrace it, learn from it, grow and change, we'll actually grow closer to Him and we'll be more like Him. Isn't that what He wants? Isn't He communicating to us that we're straying away from who He is and who He has called us to be? And so when we change our ways and the symptoms go away and we get healthier and we feel better, we're embracing God's design. Now, if you just cover that up with a man-made pharmaceutical drug, you haven't embraced anything. All you've done is covered up, ignored your pain, ignored God, ignored what God is trying to communicate to you. So we have to trust God's design. That's it. Trust it. Trust God. The end. Did we do it? 8:35. Oh.
Close.
But you didn't start at 6:30.
Yeah, I started 7 minutes late. So.
There you go.
So cool, man. That was awesome. That was fun.
Good.
You guys got to go. I know it's 8:30, but if anybody has a question. Yep. Is the camera still on?
Yep.
Awesome.
When's your next session?
Our next class is in 2 weeks, which is the 17th.
Oh, of course.
And it's on food. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. Talk about the biggest topic in the universe.
In 2 hours.
In 2 hours. Are you crazy?
Food.
Crazy. I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. I have 2 pages of lists of potential ideas. I need to pray.
What are you doing the one on sunshine?
I don't know. Down the road. It's food, greens, and then maybe sunshine and oxygen. Those are what's left. So, I don't know. Question? Yes?
Okay, so the compromised gut can actually lead to bedwetting?
Yeah, because bedwetting a lot of times is an infection. It's toxic urine, and when there's toxic urine in the bladder, the bladder won't keep it in there because it'll damage the lining of the bladder. So it forces it out, it pushes it out.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Is that it? Okay. Okay, well, a couple of notes. I'm glad you mentioned The Business of Being Born.
Yeah.
Favorite documentary of all time.
Oh, cool.
ever. I was actually reading just today. I was really surprised. In 2002, we're now diagnosed as 1 in 68 children have the autism spectrum.
Yep.
I didn't realize I thought it was 1 in 100, but
It gets worse every year.
yeah, but that's just 2002.
Right.
That's 12 years ago.
Right.
That it's 1 in 68. And then 2 questions. Okay, so I totally agree with you. Glad you mentioned the whole vaccine thing. But what about, I mean, because obviously I didn't get the chickenpox vaccine. I had chickenpox. But what about the chickenpox leading to shingles? What's that whole thing? Because people are kind of saying, well, you want to get that vaccine so that you don't get, like, what's the, talk about shingles.
So the question was chickenpox related to shingles. So if you get chickenpox, you get an immunity against chickenpox, and you should never get chickenpox again. You only get shingles if you have a weak immune system, and that original pathogenic organism that caused the chickenpox morphs and changes into something stronger that leads to shingles. So that only happens in an unhealthy fish tank.
Okay.
So, and shingles is actually really easy because you just take a lot of antiviral herbs and smother the external thing that can be itchy and nasty and horrible. You smother it in clay,
Okay.
and it's gone.
And then the other thing is, you know, I agree with you about the whole like washing hands and different things like that. So what are some, you know, or you were talking about soaps based with like lye.
Mhm.
Like, so what do you use? What are some? You
The
know-
soap we use is Thieves.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's Thieves soaps and there's Thieves oils and Thieves everything. My deodorant I use is a clay-based deodorant. It's got clay and essential oils, and you can use mineral salts. So yeah, anything that'll clean your hands and kill pathogenic organisms, but not sterilize,
Right.
right? So and you can just use soap, you know, for your hands. That's not that big of a deal. It's the antibacterial soaps.
Right.
That,
And
that,
will it actually distinct on there? Because I know some say it and some don't.
I don't know. I think most of them say antibacterial because it's like that's advertising. Like people want to know that they want the antibacterial soap.
Right.
So I think most of them probably say it.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other soap we use a lot is called Miracle Soap. I don't know if you've heard of that. We use Miracle Soap a lot, and it's just all mineral-based, very pure, and we use the Thieves.
Okay.
That's mainly what we use. Yes.
Okay, so you mentioned with like the optimum temperature for the curdling of milk is 98.6.
Yes.
I think, which is like where our body is supposed to naturally be.
Right.
What if your temperature is naturally lower than that?
Um,
You know anything about that, or why does that even happen?
Well, when people have low body temperature, there can be a number of reasons. A lot of times they attribute that to thyroid. So it's just like lower than 97 on a regular basis, that can be like an underactive thyroid. But that 98.6, that's pretty specific. But like when you put yogurt, like make yogurt in like a little dehydrator thing, usually set at like 100 degrees. So that 98.6 isn't like exact. It's still gonna work in the body. It's just interesting that that exact temperature that is the best for it is the exact temperature of the human body. Yes.
For oil pulling, I've read some stuff that it says that it really needs to be sesame or sunflower. and that coconut oil doesn't really work, and I've read other stuff that coconut oil.
I can't say for sure. She asked about oil pulling, coconut oil. She heard maybe doesn't work so great. Sesame oil is the best. I have heard sesame oil is the best. People who do a lot of oil pullings over in India, Ayurvedic medicine, and they're big on sesame oil. They say it's the purest and it pulls the most toxins out of the body, and it's just the best. So get a pure, cold-pressed, unfiltered, all that sesame oil. And I have heard that's the best. I've heard olive oil works really well too. Coconut oil, a lot of people say, yeah, do it, use it. I can't imagine it'd be bad, but yeah, maybe it's not the best. I don't know. I haven't read on coconut oil specifically. So if you want to be safe, I would say just do the sesame oil.
I have a comment on that too.
Great.
I have researchers. I think partially it could be because they've like studied the Ayurvedic stuff for so long. They probably didn't have maybe not as much coconut. So I'm not sure if they have coconut oil.
That's true. Yeah, they probably don't have
So
coconut.
they probably
Could be.
their traditional use, and so they're more apt to want to go with the traditional what they've used for thousands of years. Kind of what their medicine's based on is tradition.
Makes sense.
So it could just be that.
Because I mean, if you think about the healing properties of coconut oil, I can't see why it would, you know.
Exactly. We know it's antibacterial, antiviral, I mean, all that. So,
Right.
yeah.
Sourdough bread,
Yes.
is that, I've heard that that's actually like a probiotic even though it's white flour.
Yep. So sourdough is fermented, and so that's the healthiest bread to eat, is a fermented bread. And if you have health issues and you have trouble with bread, but you want to have a little bread once in a while, definitely do the fermented sourdough bread. We don't eat a lot of bread, but once in a while we buy bread. I mean, ideally you'd make it at home, but people don't do that anymore. Hopefully we get back to that. You know, like I said, we get back to the farms and get back to doing that. But we buy a bread. We found a bread, and I can't remember what store it is, but it had 4 ingredients: rye, cultures, yeast, and salt. So it's a fermented rye. It was a whole rye with sourdough culture and the yeast and the salt. That was it. And that's how we used to make bread. You know, what's interesting if you look at the history of bread making is they'd actually take ashes from the wood stove. So the wood would burn down into ashes, and they'd mix the ashes into the bread.
Why?
Health. It's what we're made out of.
Yeah.
I don't know if they knew that. Maybe it enhanced the flavor. I don't know. But that's something that people used to do.
But so, I mean, if it's a good sourdough, then even though it's actually really white flour, the fermenting overshadows the negative.
I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine. I don't know the history of sourdough. You know what I didn't mention? I mentioned the Nutrition for Babies book. I should have mentioned the Nourishing Traditions book. So I'll just go ahead and mention it now. Nourishing Traditions is a great book that explains the history of how we ate food. How did we make bread? How did we ferment things? How did, you know? So I'm assuming sourdough was around before the Industrial Revolution. I don't know. But I know fermented bread's been around forever. Ancient cultures have eaten fermented bread throughout history. I don't know the process, but if sourdough was a bread pre-1850, it wasn't white flour, right? Because there was no such thing. So I'd have to look at the history of that. But there are ways to ferment grains and make fermented bread. Now, if you go buy a sourdough bread off the shelf at the store, I can't tell you how good that is. But people are making their own. Yep.
So for babies and for babies who have been formula, and I'm not even sure how to really say, I mean, what is the perceived need that formula is fulfilling for babies, and what should they really be on? When it's to the point that breastfeeding is not an option.
Right. So if breastfeeding isn't an option and the baby has to do formula, this is when you turn to Weston A. Price and Baby Nutrition, Super Nutrition for Babies, and they'll tell you how to make formula that's all whole food based, that's as close as human breast milk as possible. Because the formula isn't anywhere close. It's just a bunch of synthetic weird chemicals. And the thing about the formula is they put a few vitamins and minerals in there that the baby probably needs, but it's mostly just calories. If you think about our medical system, it's all about weight, and are you the ideal weight, and what percentile are you? They don't look at health. They don't look at nutrition. They just load the baby full of calories so that it gains weight, and they think if the baby is gaining weight, it's getting healthy.
And then at what age can you remove Do you know what I mean? I mean, when can they just be on food and not even be dealing with dairy or formula?
Really quick. I mean, if they're getting all the nutrients that they need, I mean, they can wean off of formula really quickly, like within the first year. You know, you can start feeding baby solid foods at 5-6 months.
Would you suggest that though?
No, probably not, because they need a lot of nutrition in the beginning.
And doesn't technically milk break down as a solid? Like a lot of people,
What do you mean?
like what you were saying about milk and the way it goes through our bodies.
Yep.
Doesn't it actually become a solid, or
When it curdles?
yeah, like the whole curdling process and all of that? Because I mean, you know, you have a child, a baby, and you are changing a dirty diaper. It's not just urine,
Right.
and so
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. The problem today is that, you know, I'm guessing for years, centuries, people probably gave their babies cow milk and goat's milk because it was the closest we had to human breast milk. The problem today is children are weak and they're compromised and they can't process and digest dairy.
And it's not
Ch-
raw anymore.
Well, and it's not raw, but even if it is raw. I mean, I see children with allergies, eczema, all these issues, and the parents are doing raw milk thinking it's the best and the right way. The baby can't process it. And so they get them off the raw milk and the eczema goes away, the allergies go away, the asthma goes away. It's the number one thing I see help children is getting off of dairy, even quote-unquote healthy dairy. It's because the children are compromised.
So what would you recommend drinking? Just water other than cow's milk? I mean,
Weston A. Price. Go to their website. They have a whole mother section. They tell you exactly what they recommend and when and what month and what you know what you can try. Try cow's milk. If cow's milk doesn't work, try goat's milk. But if you're going to do goat's milk, add this, this, and this, and this to it because it doesn't have vitamin C and this and that. And you know they have all that information. I don't know all that information.
Bravo.
Cool. Sayonara.
the name of that book again?
Well, Weston A. Price, he has a website. I think it's westonaprice.com. And they have a women's section. And there's something you can get called the Healthy Baby Issue. We actually have that on our website. The Healthy Baby Issue has articles on vaccines. It's got formulas for how to make your own formula. It's got all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
But the book or go to the website?
Go to the website. Yeah, the book is called The Healthy Baby Issue. It's a publication from Weston A. Price. And you can get that on their website. You can get that on our website too. I have a whole children's pregnancy section. I have books and different things on there. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of articles, videos, articles on home births, why home births are safer than hospital births, and there's all kinds of stuff in there. Cool?
You didn't even mention kombucha or kefir or anything, which, I mean, you like barely
Yeah,
mentioned.
did I not have a section? Did I skip it?
No, it's,
You started to talk about something, and then right when you were going to talk about that, you went to the next thing.
Right.
You did kind of skip that. It's true.
Oh, eating fermented foods on a daily basis. Fermented veggies, kombucha, yogurt, coconut yogurt, Bragg's apple cider vinegar. Bummer. Yeah, I wish I could have spent, you know, even 5-10 minutes on those. But hey, at least I listed them there. I mean, like I said, there's just no time.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love having this general. This is almost kind of like now, like these classes I'm doing are almost like a general outline, and then we can go deeper, you know, next time we do classes or whatever. So it'll be fun. But yeah, those are the basic ones, like the basic fermented foods. I'm a kombucha fan. Yeah, I like it.
Bob just started making his own kimchi.
All right, lots of cayenne pepper.
Not yet. Well, not for me, for her.
Okay. I like the spicy stuff. Cool. Okay, thanks. See you next time.